All right, everybody, welcome back to the Telivy MSP podcast. Very, very excited to share with you our guest today. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Stephen Holt, own Holt Data Solutions, and we're a managed security service provider.
Awesome, very, very cool. And I'm Jeremy, head of partnerships at Telivy, and we run automated risk assessments for MSPs. So let's get right down to it. Tell me about Holt Data Solutions.
Yeah, so we got started as a consulting business with mainly a bunch of guys in the Army with me, different. And what we did is we did a lot of cybersecurity for the Army, and so on the weekends we started to kind of do consulting for private industry. And in 2020, one of the companies we were consulting with had a breach, and the part of the network that we were responsible for had been secured, and it's the only data that was able to that was unaffected by the breach. And so what we had realized is we had done very little for these companies except for kind of tell them what needed to be done and then rely on who they had and on their staff. And so we kind of branched out at that moment to hire our own technicians and start implementing a lot of the things that we found. But yeah, that was our first brush with ransomware. And then we started now where we go into businesses and we can structure all of their security and backups and everything else to prevent ransomware attacks. And if the unlikely event we can't prevent it, then we back up enough different ways that we almost can guarantee recovery. So
That's super interesting, and I'd love to dive into those ransomware cases with your team. But just real quick, do you notice that the video footage that we're getting from your cameras, there's like these lines that are flashing up and down?
I'm not actually sure what that is.
Okay. Oh, no problem. But yeah, I was surprised. So you mentioned that you work in the U.S. Army full time, but you were working just with some friends and colleagues on the weekends with this. So it was during that breach that you decided to transition full time. Can you tell me a little bit about the team?
So yeah, it kind of was I guess the door for the path to move between the two different industries, and around the same time as had some friends retiring, but it worked out to where I was able to kind of make a different transition to where it was easy to just walk out of one into the civilian sector and work that angle instead.
Interesting. And I noticed on your website, you have a wide range of expertise of services that your team provides. There's automation and programming, which highly technical custom programming, plus cybersecurity consulting, strategy, design, right? Very high level strategy type of services. So I guess I'm curious about the team from that aspect. Is it everybody sort of does both, or do you have like a dedicated team for the highly technical work and then like a strategy team, design team? How does it work?
So we a few of us overlap in different areas. I think everyone is able to work in at least two different areas.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up getting into programming because we hired a programmer with cybersecurity experience because we wanted to automate a lot of our security processes so we could get things done quicker. And so we hired a cybersecurity programmer who I don't think you had a chance to meet him. We'll have to bring him on some other time. But he actually started with us mainly in just cybersecurity. And then what we would do is if we found issues on networks, we were writing scripts and then pushing out domain-wide corrections for networks instead of having to go machine by machine. And so we were able to automate those processes. But then it kind of, because we had a programmer, then it started to open other doors where we started to develop our own systems and our own programs. And then businesses would come to us, and we worked with other MSPs where they would need gaps where, we had one that worked with a bank, and then they had a software that would automate essentially how 20 something different servers and all the different banks, so that all the financial data would stay exactly the same at the same time. And all backbone by a singular script that would run on that network. And they had issue with the script, and so then we get hired on to do stuff like that, fix those scripts. And so that's what started to get us into programming. We started doing a lot of cloud solutions, and then we started to get into building out cloud networks and infrastructure. Same thing, it was, instead of building out a virtual network, we wrote a program to deploy virtual networks so that you could deploy a network, do what you have to do with it, and then destroy the network and kill it, so you're not wasting any time in the cloud. And so that's kind of how the basis grew for that. And then we would bring someone else on, and then they would come in with skills. And so we have a stack developer that works with our cybersecurity program, and two of them together are building out some of the work we're doing for auto remediation and like automated scripts and stuff like that. So
very cool. And for the less technical folks in our audience, whether it's MSPs or clients, could you explain to us the impact or significance of this automation, right? How much time or money or manual labor it saves every single time that it reoccurs? Because I see it as a huge differentiator for Halt data solutions. Could you break that down for us?
So one of the things we were working on when we started our automations process was something called CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Management Model, which is the new government certification for their data in civilian industry. But that model, where we started, what we would do is when we would go in and we put in a security control, and then we would write it out. And so we have the script essentially now, and we deploy it instead of machine by machine. So if you wanted, we'll say TPM 2.0 for like data at rest, that's what encrypts data on a hard drive whenever the machine's not on. So if somebody steals a laptop, if it has TPM 2.0 enabled, then the data on that hard drive is encrypted and they can't break into it without having the full decryption code, right? So something like that could now, instead of being done machine by machine, it could be deployed, and all the machines are told to encrypt themselves one night. And so they all enable the TPM 2.0 chip inside of them, and they encrypt themselves overnight. The next morning, everyone comes in, and the only difference is now you're getting asked for a BIOS pin, essentially, to decrypt it. And so it saves, an exponential amount of time. Like the first time we would go through and do it by hand, and you're paying a technician an hour per machine, and now you have 150 machines, and we can do it in a single night, which is one automation, and run it through the domain controller and tell all the clients to do it themselves. So,
and I know you've been either working with or looking into a lot of things related to AI. I know that AI and automation go hand in hand. We'll talk about AI at the end of the podcast, but I'm very excited to bring that back up again. But I wanted to hear a little bit about your the work, the projects, maybe some customer case studies. Do you mainly serve military use cases, or is there anything that you could talk about?
Generalities for sure I can talk about.
Yeah.
So I think our big thing where we have the most experience is we're pretty much a complete veteran business as of now. Most of everyone who's come to work has actually, somebody knew them from their military service, and as they're coming out of the military service, they're looking for work. And then that's how we've gotten most of our employees, is that during their transition out of the service. So our niche is definitely goes into CMMC certifications, where we have experience on DoD networks and understand the DoD infrastructure and requirements. They basically just took that and put it aside. So a lot of what we do is we align security on civilian networks to what the government has on their NIPRNet, which is the lowest classified network in the US government. It's the non-classified network. So, but it's still a very secure network. But it's right below your classified network. So that's where we get customers as close to that, and then start trying to change culture, where military taught us like the culture of the military is a very cyber secure environment, right? Even a lot of the stuff where you're in it and you're like, oh, this is ridiculous, this annual training that I have to do online and this and that, and I can't charge my cell phone off of my computer, and I can't do this, and I can't plug in this, and I can't do this, and I can't download this, and I can't put a disk in it without an exception or this, and I can't download anything. And like inside of it, without understanding it, you're like, this is, a horrible usable system, right? But the culture understands it, and it's used to plain text emails and everything else. And the reason why it's such a secure network is because everyone understands that level of availability it's not quite there. But cloud transformation, even in the government side, has actually started to change availability, because with the technology of the cloud, there are so many security protocols that can be put in place without affecting availability as much. And so as we made this transition, cloud is somewhere we really started to move towards, especially the Azure computing environment, because inside of Microsoft Azure, you have everything from Microsoft Copilot, and then you have all these systems where before you would have to run hundreds of tools and remediations and everything else. In the cloud, everything is there. The SCCM has been moved into, MDM, or mobile device manager, and Intune and Autopilot and all these different systems, and they're all connected together and GUI interfaces or programs. And so we're working in that direction as well. So it's somewhere where we can change these networks without making them as restricted, but still keeping them as secure. And then just working with the companies to continue to try to push the environmental change of annual cyber awareness training. And we run like quarterly phishing simulations, and we start trying to make that understanding that, your computer isn't as safe as you want to believe it is.
Yeah, I think that's the a huge part of that culture. The closest I've been to the culture was I was an intern at the NSA, and it's a completely different world, but amazing in its own sense. And I want to go back to I'm curious. So you mentioned the breach example, right? You have a client has a breach, or there's ransomware. More cases of ransomware these days than ever before. What is your process to addressing and solving, patching vulnerabilities, mitigating risk, or fixing things when
proactive or reactive? Two processes, right? So proactive or reactive, or I can do both. Reactive is easy. So reactive, we only really have a couple of options. So in reactive, we get the phone call, it's already too late. We have one option, which is we run algorithm cracker against, if it's AES 128 or lower, as far as the algorithm goes that they use, we can probably break it in 1 to 2 weeks. One of the reasons why we wrote the auto creation of the cloud network is that we can use cloud computing power. So we actually have the ability to deploy an entire network infrastructure in the cloud, and its sole purpose will be to break that algorithm. And then, of course, the faster it needs to be, the larger we scale it up. It's expensive, of course, because cloud computing at that level it's a massive amount of data that we have to run all the different algorithms against it to crack it. Another one is we rip the website, or so a lot of times the attacker would use, they tend to show a website, like they'll have this, and if you drop one of your files here, it'll decrypt it to show that we can decrypt your data. So we use a website ripper to rip down the website and then see if we can pull the algorithm through the backside, which sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's also kind of a double-edged sword. Those are the two reactive. You don't really want to end up there. Proactively, we have some very unique ways that we do backups where we make them without telling exactly what we do. We make them virtually invisible whenever you do a network scan. So we make what we're kind of calling cool backup systems, where it's very similar to cold storage, where it's completely disconnected, but it's not completely disconnected, and it's turned on to do backups, and then it's turned off, and when it's turned off, all the ports are hidden that it exists behind and everything else. So it's kind of difficult to find. So that one then we use backups in the cloud, we use network segmentation, and those are some of your bigger ways. Data encryption for PII is a big one, because there's two reasons why businesses have to pay. One is to get their data decrypted, and the other one is to avoid a large data leakage so if you have a lot of PII, let's say that somebody gets your employee file, they have every single one of your employees' social security number, date of birth, everything, to steal all of their data. That becomes something that can be sold. And so one of the reasons why the business would have to pay the ransom is to stop that. There's actually a few ransomware groups now that have stopped encrypting data on servers, and they're only ransoming back data that they stole. So that's one of the big ones, but we use encryption for PII. So you can just password protect or use certificate authentication for them. Outside of that, there's a lot of layers where we use multi-factor authentication, we use geotagging, some of the they're getting more normal, more industry standard. Geotagging is one of the big ones.
Briefly, could you explain what that is?
Yeah. So geotagging is when you log in, it's going to see where you are. Now with machine learning and AI, it actually, if you go somewhere, let's say that you're in Los Angeles and you log in, and then 5 hours later you log in Las Vegas, but that's okay, right? It's going to allow that. But if you logged in Los Angeles and 20 minutes later you logged in Las Vegas, it's going to block you, because there's no way that you went that amount of time. So it automatically blocks that user. And most of the time, there's no way to really know where a business user is going to be logging in from. So a lot of times hackers will spoof their IPs in the same state, or they'll spoof their IPs central United States just for good luck. I see them get spoofed out of Nevada a lot for some reason in Vegas. That's why I use Vegas. Vegas is actually one of the ones that gets hit a lot. But they'll spoof to somewhere close by. But with geotagging, it blocks that login immediately, and then it goes up for review. Then there's password reset, and then it stops that breach.
Yeah, I only have firsthand experience with geotagging because I get blocked from sharing my Netflix password with my friends, cousins, sisters, second aunt Netflix account. So I'm curious, you explained, proactive versus reactive solutions and what you do to protect your clients' data. I'm curious how you communicate this to your clients and how your clients respond. What percentage of the demographic is like, I got you, we're on the same page, let's go, start today, right? How many they only come to you when there's a fire and you got to go and fix and be reactive, or how many just don't think they need it? I'm curious what the demographic is of your customers.
I got to be honest, as of now, most all of my customers have come to me because they needed it. So most of the attacks that have originated it is smaller ones, where it's someone's in our network and we don't want them here, like, and then we'll go in and flush them out and find the hole and patch it. Once that door is open, that's when businesses are normally ready to spend the money that it takes. When we are able to make the sell before, a lot of it's monetary wise, right? So like blowing out that network, my Microsoft bill would be almost $50,000 to crack an AES 128. Like that's the level of computing power we're talking. So we're just saying that's how much I'm paying Microsoft. The bill for a reactive is going to be huge. It's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, easy. Where on proactive, the bill would be in the tens of thousands, where all the network, all the data could be backed up. And then on the, once again, we're not cracking anything. We're probably not cracking AES 256 until we're retiring. So like, so it's got to be AES 128 or lower. So you're gambling that it could even be done because depending on how advanced the algorithm is. Yeah. Luckily, they want to deploy that algorithm fast, so they're not using one that's so advanced it takes too much time. And 128 is about the norm, and that's about the highest level of encryption that we can actually break. So a lot of it is the dollar figure. It's kind of like cyber insurance. If you spend the money on cyber insurance up front, you're going to pay 12 to 15,000. Then cyber insurance on the back, they're going to have to kick out the six-figure payments. Whereas if there's a proactive, you're kicking out, 10 to 30,000, depending on what level. But at the same time, the chances that something happened is cut down exponentially because 99.9% of the attacks you're going to face are already going to get stopped, which means you're never going to have to deal with recovery. And in the event you have to deal with recovery, it's going to be extremely fast. So days. And then because you're hired on, we're very similar to cyber insurance. Well, if you hired us and then the gap that they hit was based because of us, we're recovering your systems and you're not getting charged any more money because you've already paid us. Whereas on the other end, you're calling me for the first time to tell me that I'm going to lose my business. Well, I'm going to do everything I can to help you with this. It is at that point very difficult. So a lot of times that's how because we're very similar to cyber insurance in the fact that we're able to work on it afterwards. If we're paid ahead of time, we're a lot cheaper. And we were in tandem. The last ransomware recovery job we did, we were in tandem with a cyber insurance provider. And so together we worked really well, and the business was back up and running within a week. And the business didn't have to spend anything. I think the full breach cost almost $300,000 between all the IT costs, the downtime, everything else, and the insurance paid everything. And fully recovered business within 1 week. Everyone just got a little vacation.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't sound so bad, and and they know that your team's got it all taken care of, right? We're going to be back up in a week. So I feel like these attacks can happen to anyone. Actually, I'm curious to ask you, are these exploits only for these big teams or big companies or big enterprises, or you've seen small, medium, large, all sort of hit with ransomware?
It's getting to the point where I don't know many business owners that haven't dealt with some level of breach. And most of the businesses we work with are small and medium-sized companies. Yeah. So I think right now the biggest targets are the ones that are hitting in the $10 to $50 million worth of annual revenue range, because they have the money to pay, because they're big enough, but they're small enough that their IT cyber teams are not to the same level as they are in the higher earning companies. That's where we have probably seen the most and affected the most change, is in that that medium scale business, 50 to 100 employees, and somewhere gross revenue somewhere around 10 to 50 million a year.
Interesting. And so we actually got in contact through Telivy. I understand that Halt Data Solutions uses Telivy. Could you tell us a little bit about what you use Telivy for?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Telivy, it was when we were building our package for basically guaranteeing ransomware prevention package. One of the things we were looking into was a quick, easy, accessible way to get cyber insurance. And we stumbled on Telivy, and I would say it had to be within its first 6 months really coming out.
Yeah.
So we were one of the first that kind of came in and sat down and then started putting it as part of that product where we're using it for the ransomware prevention package, because it is the reality of cybersecurity and the reality of networks is that it's too complex to stop everything. It's just one person clicks an email and now all of that person's data is jeopardized. Well, since their credentials jeopardized, they can sit on that network and pose as that person and send emails to their colleagues and get them to click on links that they would never have normally clicked on, but it got sent to them by their colleague.
Yep.
Next thing you know, you've stolen half the credentials of the company, and you do so quietly, and nobody ever thinks about it. And you spoof your location to their office location. So as long as you're spoofing in the same town, geotagging doesn't hit you. Multi-factor authentication doesn't work on man-in-the-middle attacks where the session cookie gets stolen. So there's these different ways that they start stealing session cookies through clicking the links, right? So like there's these different avenues that the only thing that you can combat that with is user training and anomaly-based security. If they do anything, once they do it, then anomaly-based security detection will normally stop it before it gets too far, but there's still going to be something. And it is, you don't know what they're downloading, even if they're just downloading a normal amount. 2 or 3 personnel files a day for a year is a pretty significant data breach. But 2 or 3 personnel files per day for a year would not trip any alarms or sensors on the network. So the way my cybersecurity programmer says it is he's kind of our white hat as well. So, and he says you just have to outsmart the idiots. And so 99% of the time we can outsmart the idiots, but the 1% that we can't, we still recommend highly recommend cyber insurance on all of our clients. As of right now, all of our clients carry some form of cyber insurance, whether it's through Telivy or insurance brokers they already had. But that I don't think that in today's world it's worth it, because I have talked to the business owners that their entire life to build a company is locked out, and that's it. They have fire insurance. If somebody would have burned down their business, they would have got paid, but everything's locked and there's nothing left to do. And I think until you meet them, it's very difficult to understand the significance of it. And so we can beat them 99%, but cyber insurance is for the other 1%.
Yeah, but I feel like everybody's experienced this sort of social engineering phishing scam, right? And email. And sure, we've seen the very outrageous like lies and phishing, and we go, oh, that's fake, that's a hack, or that's, don't click that. But I'm sure we've all experienced like, oh, a colleague or a friend or a coworker just sent us something, and usually we go, hey, did you get hacked, right? Like, or we check in with them in person, but like there's still like, oh, like late at night, right? And you check something and you're not thinking, or you're tired, or you just finished working, and you just want to, and I mean, I've had that happen to myself, just not thinking. It's like, oh, normally if I were awake and on coffee, I would have noticed that. Yeah, so it's like, oh, come reset your password, right? It's like, so yeah, it can really happen to everybody, and you know, can't stop everything. So absolutely. And so I'm curious about uh uh actually, I don't want I want to move on to so you're an expert in this field, and you know, you're working with these clients. I'm sure you stay up to date on the news as well. You know, what new vulnerabilities and risks are out there. Would you I guess for folks who aren't, you know, up to date on what to look out for, what are some things that folks should look out for?
So right now, the world's changing a lot, right? Generative AI is the new tool of hackers.
Wow.
Other than that, I update your Google Chrome. It just had a published vulnerability, but that's the normal stuff, right? So like, that's not the fun stuff to talk about. But yeah, if you have a Google Chrome, there's a new vulnerability in it, so they can steal your session cookies out of it. Just update it. They patched it. But generative AI, right? Now, because the way generative AI works is there is phishing campaigns being created by generative AI.
Wow.
Where
Oh, that's scary.
these emails come to you and it feels real, like, and they'll say, and they'll communicate. You email it back, and it'll communicate back with you. They're doing a pretty good job of shutting down a lot of them, because of what they're doing is they're using APIs through something like ChatGPT or something like that, where they're creating a subset. They're pulling data out of that generative AI into a function that they've programmed it to do.
It won't be long, right? Because it's open source.
Right.
There's going to be
Yep.
a dark web version.
Yeah, and so it's just a matter of time that everyone's going to have their own AI, you know, and it is making it way more difficult, because now you can do that at scale. And so that's the big change in the landscape right now. And so best way to do it is I would say before you do any, you know, monetary exchanges with a new client, you have some kind of meeting, either virtual, face-to-face, like this. Very difficult to do this. Sure, there's deep fake technology and stuff like that, but very difficult that you're going to have the face-to-face. You make sure you know who you're doing it with. You make sure that it's under, you check an EIN, right? You can open corporate networks. You look for full data solutions that'll tell you we're licensed in Florida and Texas, right? You can find that out in 30 seconds through nonprofit websites. And then something I think we're losing touch with is Better Business Bureau, which used to be a huge thing. Before social media, it used to be that's how you figured out who you want to do business with or not. Better Business Bureau does a really good job of vetting everyone. Still a nonprofit, so it's not a for-profit company that you just buy. So I recommend a lot of things like that now, of checking for those types, because these are almost your whaling / phishing attempts at scale that we've never seen anything like. So those are definitely the bigger like issues that we're running into now. The code generative AIs are able to write malicious code on accident still. So it's kind of, you got to trick it, but it'll still do it. There's plenty of blogs online that'll tell you exactly how to trick it. I won't go into that, but you can trick it and you can get it to write pretty much anything you need it to write. And so some of that stuff is coming out, and so it's really just taking it slow. The military, we always said slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I like copying my links and pasting them in a text document. So if a hyperlink has been changed to look like something else and it's hidden what's inside of it, you paste it into a text document, and it's going to paste into that text document what you're actually putting into your web browser.
Yep.
So I like doing stuff like that, just to make sure that I'm going to where I think I am going. Then if I want to still follow through with that link, then I can put it into a browser. So there's stuff like that. Looking for validity, look for mistypings and URLs and stuff like that that can still kind of keep you safe. But really just knowing who you're doing business with, who you're talking to, who you're sending money, and safeguard your PII. Like, no matter what, safeguard your PII. Keep it off your networks, keep it off your hard drives. Like, if I keep most of mine on a USB drive, if I need it, it's there. I have backups of all my important personal stuff, and it's in a house safe. I don't have to worry about that. Cold storage for your personal PII. Vaults and data vaults, they're good if you have to have high availability to your PII and to other people's PII. They're great, but they also can run into some of the same if someone gets into your system because you communicated with the wrong person online.
Yeah, and absolutely. And there's so many, new vulnerabilities out there, right? The Chrome patches just came out, and the generative AI, it's constantly evolving and improving. I'll do a shameless plug here. So, Telivy risk assessments, you could run that to understand what your risks and vulnerabilities are. You could also use it for constant monitoring, have it run regularly or assessments. And it's connected to a vulnerability database that gets updated. So, trying to gather all this news and information can be really hard, but, Televy can just do it all automated for you. So I want to, go back and get a little more personal, a little less technical now. So are you currently serving in the U.S. Army in Germany as well, or is it full-time at Halt Data Solutions now?
So I'm still in, right now I'm still serving, so.
And I guess I was curious what your journey, because you originally started in Texas, right?
Correct.
Yeah, how, I guess I'd love to learn about your journey. Like how'd you make it to Germany?
We originally started in Florida, and then we moved the business to Texas. It's as I moved. So we right now Hold Data Solutions. My wife is a lawyer, and so company's in her name. And then I kind of just volunteer my time to steer it, and she manages it and keeps it all. So way the military works is you can work outside of it to an extent, as long as it doesn't interfere with it at all. For me, it definitely doesn't interfere with my 9 to 5, or it's more than 9 to 5 in the Army, but like so the business doesn't interfere at all with it, and all the contracts go through my wife and everything else, and through a bunch of really good cybersecurity professionals that we have that work with us. And so that part's interesting, right? But so that's how we kind of manage it. And then the way that it moved to Texas is I was in Texas. I was stationed in Texas. So we started the business in Florida. I ended up in Texas. So being in Texas, actually, it was a baseball game that I ran into a business owner who was having issues with an MSP, or not issues with a multi-factor authentication, and the MSP hadn't been able to figure out how to do it. And so we were just talking at a baseball game, and I was like, oh, you know what, I'll help you out. And next thing you know, I have the business in Texas. So kind of just carrying it around with us. So right now, just being in Germany is more managing what we had already built in the States, and then every few years we'll move again, or I'll end up transitioning. But for now, I still enjoy doing both. So it's been a very interesting journey to try to do both, where I think most people in business make a mistake of doing the things they don't have to do. Since my bandwidth was always limited in the business, I never really did more than I had to do. And so far, I haven't over-relied on the people I've hired, and I haven't under-relied on them. So far, the talent in the company has been very well meshed, and we've been able to perform to the expectations I had whenever we started the business in 2019. We've been able to perform to that expectation without, I've never really had to work more than 20 or 30 hours a week in the business.
Wow.
So
it's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible how you've been able to balance that, work balance and form a team around it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting. I had a friend who had a similar, from the Texas base to the Germany base. And he also works in IT. For and I hear the Germany's base is really really nice too. But for the folks in the US who may only get news of this, I guess I'm curious with the global climate right now, how living in Germany has been for you personally. Do you, yeah, what's the environment like? How does it feel? Does it feel safe? Like,
Yeah, it doesn't feel that much different, except for when you get your utility bills at the end of the month. I think they're up like 400% right now, but other than that,
you take that for granted.
it feels about the same. I would say that the workload is much larger. For what I do in the military, it's quite a bit more than it would have been, but it's still very manageable. So I think I'm lucky that I came here and I have the same job for the third time. So the first time I had this job, it was very difficult. Second time I had this job, I kind of got most of the ins and outs. Then I came here, and although there's a lot more going on, it's the third time I've been in the same role. And so I kind of don't have to learn as much. I'm learning how to refine instead of learning how to actually do. And so even though there's a lot, the volume of work to be done right now with all of the military in Europe is doing a lot right now. And so I think for that, it's been pretty manageable so far. And then fortunate again that, as we had a manager come on in Texas within 2 to 3 months of me leaving, and just right person, right time, available with the right skill set. And so I definitely owe it to them. And of course, my wife, who's my lawyer and CFO, and keeps me out of jail, really, right? So like makes all the contracts that are right and legal and keeps the business legal, and then pays all the bills. So that's been the way that I've been able to.
And I imagine it's absolutely amazing to have a team and a community of veterans, right, who understand and are supportive around you as well. So I noticed that you went to American Military University, and it made me think, was this sort of your plan all along? Like, was this your dream as a kid to pursue this?
So my dream as a kid was to be a scuba diver, truck driver, cop,
All right,
soldier. I don't know. There's
cool.
a bunch of things, right?
Yeah,
I
it's not too
joined.
late.
Yeah, I joined the military. I was actually going to school when I joined the military for electrical estimating. So I left a job as an apprentice electrician, and I was going to college at night for estimating. And there was some recruiters that worked at one of our job sites because we were remodeling an armory, and they got me. So then I joined the Army. That was about 17 years ago now. And so the plan later in my military career, I always wanted to be a business owner. My first business plan was electric company, and then I kind of lost interest over time with getting into military communications. So first 4 years I spent in the military, I was in the infantry, which is the normal soldier you picture on TV. 4 years into that part of the career, I decided to make a change, and I went into what we're calling now signal operations. So it's full spectrum signal operations, which includes everything from cybersecurity to radios. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 13 years. And so throughout my time, my business plans kind of kept changing. In Korea in 2019 is when we opened the business. And the idea was actually to use it to make toolboxes for IT. I had run into issues where I couldn't get a toolbox that actually worked to troubleshoot, and have all the tools that you need for an IT specialist. But then it's not just big, bulky, IT specialists, we're not really looking to carry around a big, clunky toolbox,
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was my first plan. And so I built this prototype, really proud of it, public in case. It was an awesome toolbox. But the grand total on this toolbox came with like $1,600. So I'm like, I started realizing how difficult it was, but it's like, we're going to do it anyway. All the way until COVID, we got contracts, we got everything lined up to do it.
Nice.
There was 2 companies in Canada that we were going to use. One of them was Nanook, which is the case manufacturer. The other one is this little small tool foam company. And COVID happened, and the tool foam company just kind of disappeared. And so we backburnered it. And when Ray got back, that's when we got into consulting. And consulting was just much easier. There's no overhead of buying tools. There's no resale licenses. There's no prints. There's no anything. There's just what you know about cybersecurity, and you're bringing it to an industry that needs knowledge. And so that's whenever I went around to some of the highest performers that I knew through my military career, called them up and said, hey, let's do this, and talk to them. There's a memo that you have to do to be allowed to work. So pretty easy for me to do it. I've been in the Army long enough. I know how to make that. So I'd send it to their commands and basically just say that, Army's first, and then they can work for me on the side. And so a lot of them were, happy and very experienced, because, the Army just spares no expense in their cybersecurity technicians.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of talent inside of the U.S. military whenever it comes to that. So that kind of turned to where the business became more cybersecurity based. But it was a very, I was always going to own some kind of business. It just changed a bunch of times of what it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean that sounds exactly like business, and it's amazing being able to follow your career journey throughout all of this. I never would have guessed that you worked on a toolbox, IT toolbox product. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I teased this earlier. AI, generative AI. I'm curious to hear just any thoughts that you have, or I know you've been researching it and looking into it a lot. I'm personally curious what this means for cybersecurity, for both sides, for the defense and encryption and solution side, but also what that means to the hackers and the attacks and exploits side. So, but yeah, AI.
Yeah. So on the defense side, right, for the defense industry, since that's one of the things that I can talk about a little easier than a lot of people, it's really awesome where they're going with it. What we're looking at is the ability, and you can actually see a lot of this. Northrop Grumman is posting about their plan for the future of what's called C2 command and control, where AI is going to sort through the massive amount of data that comes in off of a battlefield. So we developed something called a common operating picture. So the common operating picture is one screen where you're supposed to be able to show all of what's going on in a battlefield. So you can imagine that is a very difficult screen to make. The higher the echelon, the larger the screen gets, but it always stays just one screen. So what AI is going to be used for is sifting through all of that data to provide relevant data for the commanders to make decisions. So the AI won't make decisions. There's no plans to allow AI to make decisions on a battlefield. There's no plans to give it access to weapons or anything else. So
Right.
don't worry.
Of course.
We're not looking at Terminator. So the plan is to allow it the data, the raw data coming in from spot reports to everything else, where somebody saw an enemy here, somebody saw an IED here, somebody saw this here, and it's going to be able to take
decisions.
So it's going to take all that data and it's going to present it to a person. who's going to be able to drive decisions. And so it's what they're looking at right now is to help it create the cut through the fog of war. On the cybersecurity generative side, that's somewhere where we're working in that space. On the civilian sector, we're actually working with Salus vulnerability tool, scanning tool, to look at all these different vulnerabilities and how we can remediate it automatically using artificial intelligence. A lot of what we wrote throughout, we're writing a script, but that script's going to work on a Microsoft Server 2016, but it's not going to work on a Microsoft Server 2019, but it couldn't work on this, but it could work on this. And there's all these parameters where what we're looking to use deep learning to do is to cut through the fog of writing the right stuff to be able to improve these systems. And so essentially we're going to take code that we've written and then allow AI to be able to answer questions and steer it. And then it goes back to an actual person, another programmer who understands what they're looking at. And then we're going to allow that to go on to a client to be able to have, at the click of a button, something that would normally cost a company almost 6 figures to be able to have on staff. And AI is going to allow us to be able to do that to where we can start affecting the industry and more than just saying, hey, you have a problem, but you have a problem, and if you click this button, we'll give you a solution. So that is going to be one of the big revolutions to start making us a little bit more proactive to where we can use the AI strengths the same as the attackers are using the AI for our weaknesses.
Wow, that's incredible. And you guys are in the best position to do it because you've been designing and programming solutions and automations, for years and years and years. So that's a lot that the AI can learn from. And ultimately it goes back to the programmer for now. Is it kind of like a GitHub Copilot specifically tailored for cybersecurity for what you guys do?
GitHub Copilot's more designed for coding in general. It can help us. But I think as of right now, most of the industry has been focused on app development for different things. Less concerned about, because if you think there's not as much, right? If I could sell an app, if I can sell a developer an app, if I can write an app, like that's going to be worth a lot, right? For these companies that just need a script, a PowerShell script. But it's not always going to be a PowerShell script. Sometimes it's going to come in the form of, one of the things we're looking at is we've kind of built some good training programs to where we're actually going to start a Copilot for technicians. This is way in the future, but most of what's out there now, you still need someone who knows what they're doing. You still have to have that programmer to look at it because, GitHub Copilot is only getting 95% accurate right now. And so you still have to come up with the other 5%. Right now, that's where AI is. AI is a 90% solution, and the other 10 is still going to have to come from experienced individuals.
Wait, so that's incredible. So it's even better than Copilot because Copilot just sort of recommends like, oh, are you thinking about writing this kind of code? Like while a programmer is coding. But what you just said is I click a button and here's a script to solve the problem. Correct. And sure, the programmer can go, does this make sense? Is it actually going to solve my problem? Should I give it a try? But that goes really far. And maybe it doesn't solve the problem on the first try, but you give it feedback, it solves the problem on the second or third try, right? Yeah, that's absolutely incredible.
And it's all being verified before it's being delivered. Yeah. So it's getting looked at by one of our programmers first.
I see. So as we wrap up here, because we only got a few minutes left, your amazing journey and all the, with military experience and experience running your own business and working with all these clients. And I'm curious if you could sort of have one takeaway or a learning or a piece of advice for Maybe like someone like you who's but just entering the industry. What learning would you say was something, that was most valuable to you that you learned from your career?
I would say that your most important aspect, your most important tool in everything that you do is leadership. The reason I say that is someone who values a shared goal that feels empowered will do the extra step. And you have to know who you can trust and who you can't. And leadership allows, like if you have well-developed leadership skills, that's what's going to allow that. You're not going to get taken out because you're going to understand people respect you, so they'll bring you their opinions. And in return, you have to make them feel valued. In the civilian world, it's always most of it goes back to finance, right? So like at the end of the day, you can empower people and you make them feel good because you're giving them what you can give them to make it work. So everyone has to make money, right? But we pay our employees the most we can, and that's how it works. And we obviously move forward that way. And at the same time, as we're paying them the best we can, we make sure that they're valued and that they understand what they're moving toward, the shared goal, the shared principles, and take the time to get to know each other. That would be mine, because everything else is massive. But a good team in any industry is invaluable. And so that's where, if I had to give anything, that's what's gotten me the furthest. And I didn't value leadership for years of my military career. I didn't understand it well enough. And so I did what I was told, and I made people do what I told them to do. It wasn't until maybe 7 or 8 years ago that I really took the time to develop my leadership skills, and my military career has taken off. My civilian career has taken off. Both have been able to run simultaneously. And the one thing that I have that I wish I could have better, but the best thing that I know that has gotten me success is valuing people to get me to where I am.
I have so many questions, but that sounds like a whole other podcast. I'd love to have another hour with you just to dig into the leadership topic. But just real briefly, I think one thing I learned from running my own startups is treating people like people, empathizing with them. They have their own dreams, goals, interests. When they're working with you, they're lending you their time, right? And understanding this is a part of their journey, their career, a next step to a self-learning experience, right? And so understanding where they want to go and go, oh, we actually have a common goal, or we can align on this thing and sort of both learn together and get to where we want to be. I think it was very, very valuable for me. That's sort of how I interpreted leadership there. But yeah, and valuing people, they value you back. So last question, who should reach out to you, and what's the best way to reach you? And then we'll hop off.
Support@holtdatasolutions.com would be the easiest. And honestly, or LinkedIn. Those are the two easiest ways to get a hold of me, and I'll be more than happy. And honestly, anything from questions to help, assistance, I'm available, and always free for a little chat and broaden my network.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen, for speaking on our podcast. Pleasure speaking with you today.
It's a pleasure to speak with you as well.